I'll never forget the day thunder rolled across those wide Kansas plains, and a heartbroken bride still in her dusty wedding gown stumbled off the stagecoach onto Red Hawk Springs' lone main street. The townsfolk whispered, called her too fat, and turned away, with mock pity, leaving her future in tatters before she could even unpack her trunk. Then along came a struggling cowboy named Tom Broken Spur. Hathaway, his spirit, as worn as the bent metal spur on his boot. In that moment he saw her despair, and despite having hardly $1 to his name, did the one thing nobody else dared. He offered her hope. This is their story. In the dusty plains of the Kansas frontier, life was built on grit and desperation. Tall grasses swayed in the wind, whispering long-forgotten tales of buffalo herds and tribal hunts. The year was 1878, and the sun-baked town of Red Hawk Springs beckoned to drifters, gamblers and would-be dreamers. Its modest handful of buildings housed all the drama of a lawless domain, and at the heart of it all stood the Buffalo Heart Saloon, named in honor of the mighty creatures that once roamed free across the prairies. Tom Broken Spur Hathaway was a cowboy to his core. His boots, scuffed and worn, told stories of endless cattle drives, and his sweat-stained hat bore witness to countless scorching days on the open range. Locals called him Broken Spur, after the bent metal spur on his right boot, a relic passed down from his late father. It had once saved Tom's life in a brawl against outlaws, and some said it carried a strange sort of luck that always skirted tragedy by a hair's breadth. He arrived in Red Hawk Springs following a punishing cattle run from Abilene, his pockets nearly empty, save for a few coins and a banknote or two. Each night he slept in barns or in the open, lulled by the lonesome howls of coyotes and the star-speckled sky. But Tom harbored a small, persistent dream, to one day own a patch of land, a decent horse of his own, and a roof that wouldn't leak during the relentless prairie storms. For now those hopes seemed distant, as mirages wavering on the horizon, with every punishing step his life took. Late afternoons often found Tom retreating to the Buffalo Heart Saloon. Its slatted wooden exterior, battered by years of wind and dust, bore the scars of a town too tough to die. Inside, the smoky air mingled with the tang of cheap whiskey and stale beer, while the battered piano in the corner stood ready to be coaxed into ragged tunes. A day came scorchingly hot as usual, when Tom sat nursing a lukewarm glass of whiskey, hoping for word of work or maybe a stroke of luck at the poker table. That was when the stagecoach rattled into town. The saloon doors swung open as curious faces peered onto the street. In the swirling dust, a figure in a wedding gown emerged, lace-frayed at the edges, veil askew. Her disembarkation was less a graceful step and more a stumbled exit, as though the heavy weight of her own despair dragged her down. Despite the heat, Tom felt an icy jolt through his veins at the sight of her tears. She stood there alone, glancing around for a groom who never appeared. Her cheeks were flushed from the sun, and perhaps from the mortification of having no one claim her. Before Tom could move, he heard the first of the cruel whispers. Reckon the man took one look at her size and left town for good. She's too big a bride for a fellow to handle. Tom bristled. He'd never had patience for bullies or those who found sport in kicking someone when they were down. Stepping away from his drink, he ventured onto the saloon's porch. Dust swirled around him, but his gaze locked on the forlorn bride. Something about her posture, half defiant, half broken, gripped him in a way he couldn't fully explain. In that charged moment, Tom Hathaway sensed the gravity of her predicament. Without family money or a shred of respect from the onlookers, She would be devoured by this ruthless frontier. The stagecoach driver, having deposited her meager trunk, cracked his whip and left in a cloud of dust as though her fate was no longer of his concern. Tom set his jaw. This was not his affair, nor did he have the means to rescue a stranger. Still, he had known too much cruelty in his own life to stand by while another soul was cast aside. He crossed the porch's creaking boards, ignoring the stares of barflies and travellers alike. At close range, he saw the heartbreak etched across her features and the determination that flared when she noticed his approach. "Ma'am," he said, tipping his hat voice low. "You all right?" A flicker of surprise crossed her tear-streaked face. Then, as if remembering her dignity, she straightened her shoulders. I'm just waiting," she managed. "Waiting for your groom," he ventured gently. She nodded, lip trembling. He was supposed to be here. She swallowed. "We were to be married tomorrow at the church, north of town." A few ragged laughs erupted from onlookers behind them, but Tom's glare silenced most. Ignoring the sneers, he offered her a hand. "Name's Tom Hathaway. Folks call me Broken Spur. Let's get you inside where it's cooler. Then we'll figure out your next step." And so began the unlikely partnership of a battered cowboy and an abandoned bride. In moments, she would introduce herself as Eliza Bradford, a name that would forever alter Tom's destiny. For in a town where lawlessness and cruelty thrived, a single act of compassion would ignite a series of events none could foresee. As Tom led Eliza into the dim saloon, the whispering crowd followed, eager for fresh gossip. What they did not know, could not know, was that these two souls bound by necessity would soon forge the kind of bond that defied the jeers of the world. Before the dust settled on her trunk or the ink dried on the day's gossip, Tom Hathaway would be tested by more than the scorching sun. Hardship, betrayal, and an unanticipated spark of affection would combine to shape a future that even the most seasoned gambler in Red Hawk Springs wouldn't dare bet on. Tom led Eliza into the dim Buffalo Heart saloon, ignoring the curious and judgmental stares. He sat her at a quiet corner table and ordered 2 waters from Charlie the barkeep. Up close, Tom could see how shaken she was. Her wedding dress dust-stained her eyes, swollen with heartbreak. She confessed it all. Roger Harris, the groom who wooed her through letters, had paid her fare and vanished without a trace. "He abandoned me," she whispered. Humiliated and stranded Tom, who had little more than a bent spur and a worn saddle to his name, felt her pain in his bones. "We'll figure something out," he said. He arranged for a room at Mrs. Caldwell's boarding house and promised to search for work to help cover her stay. That night, as he lay on straw in the livery stable, Tom couldn't shake the image of Eliza's tearful courage in a town full of cruelty. Maybe doing the right thing was reason enough to care. Early the next morning, Tom rose with the sun, the stable's straw poking his back as he sat up. He dusted off his shirt and hat mind, already turning over how to scrape together a bit more cash for Eliza's rent. Determination fueled him. If Roger Harris was a no-show, someone had to step up. He found Eliza waiting on Mrs. Caldwell's porch in the cool morning breeze. She wore a borrowed grey dress, crinkled at the elbows, and too tight across the bust, donated by a fellow boarder who took pity on her. The wedding gown lay folded in her trunk, a cruel reminder of hope gone sour. "You look a mite better rested today," Tom said. Gently, Eliza forced a smile. "I had nightmares about being stranded on a train track, but otherwise, I suppose I'm doing all right." He nodded, hands in his pockets. "I'll see if the Jenkins Ranch needs help. They pay fair for mending fences and wrangling strays." She nodded, Swallowing, "I appreciate it, truly." Her gaze faltered, revealing the crushing weight of her predicament. "I just feel so useless. I came all this way, put my entire life on hold. And now," her voice trembled, "I'd do anything to avoid living in fear of being cast out onto the street." Tom frowned. "We'll figure a way. Maybe you can help the seamstress in town, or the saloon might." She blanched. "Oh, Tom, I couldn't. The things people say." Indeed, rumors had already swirled. By mid-afternoon, the previous day, the local gossip was that Roger Harris abandoned Eliza upon learning of her unfashionable figure. The more vicious tongues insinuated that Eliza had misrepresented herself in letters, tricking Harris into marrying a woman too large to handle. Every word, every sideways glance stung Eliza to the core, and Tom bristled at how casually folk tossed around cruelty. Clearing his throat, he stuffed down his anger. "I won't let you starve, Eliza." A wave of conflicting emotions washed over her features, gratitude, uncertainty, and a hint of desperation. "You've done more for me than you should. We're not even—" She paused, looking away. "We're strangers, Tom. Yet I trust you more than the man I was meant to marry." He touched her arm lightly. "I guess we're not strangers anymore." That evening, after a grueling day laboring at the Jenkins ranch, Tom returned to Mrs. Caldwell's with a few dollars in his pocket. Exhausted but resolved, he found Eliza in the musty parlor, flickering lamplight revealing her tear-stained cheeks. "They're raising my rent in 2 days," she said, by way of greeting. "I don't know how long I can stay." Tom stared at his boots. "I'll pay it this time, but we need a better solution." Her expression crumpled, and tears began again. She nodded, voice shaky. "I don't want to be a burden. I truly don't. If it comes to it, I'll try my luck in another town. Maybe even the saloon. Anything to survive." A surge of protectiveness flared in Tom. The mere idea of her alone on the road, or forced to endure ridicule for a saloon job, twisted his stomach. He could sense how precarious her situation was, and how perilously close she was to losing any semblance of security. "What if we—" he began, then faltered. The words felt colossal. Eliza lifted her head, eyes red. "What if we—" "What?" Tom's pulse hammered. The notion was absurd, reckless. But the more he thought about it, the more it seemed like a lifeline. "If we got married," he finished, voice husky, "not for love, mind, but for protection, so you'd have a place with me, and townsfolk would have less to whisper about." Silence swelled between them, broken only by the ticking of a clock. Eliza's cheeks colored. "Marry you?" she echoed, incredulous. Tom released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "I know how it sounds. We don't even know each other that well. But I can't stand to see you cast aside. This would give you safety. And I wouldn't have to worry about you sleeping in the street." Eliza's eyes glimmered with fresh tears, but this time there was also a note of relief. "It does sound crazy," she admitted, trembling. "You'd take on all this responsibility for a stranger." Tom fixed his gaze on the worn carpet. "This territory's rough. I'm used to being on my own. But seeing how folks treat you makes me realize how vulnerable you are. We can figure out the rest as we go." She exhaled shakily, tears slipping down her cheeks. "If you're certain. But I have nothing to offer you but myself and my gratitude." He touched her hand gently. "Then that's enough." And so, in the quiet hush of Mrs. Caldwell's parlor, they forged a plan. A quick wedding would quell the gossip, buy Eliza more time under a legitimate roof, and hopefully stave off the scornful talk of the town. Neither pretended it was ideal, nor did they delude themselves into thinking romance would bloom overnight. Yet they both sensed that, in a land, this harsh survival sometimes demanded drastic choices. That night, Tom left her with a promise he would find the traveling preacher, Reverend Cole, who frequented Red Hawk Springs. Their ceremony would be simple, perhaps only witnessed by Charlie at the saloon or a handful of gawkers. Despite their mutual reservations, an odd sense of purpose grounded them. When Tom finally crawled into his stable bedroll, he stared up at the rafters, heart pounding. He'd just proposed marriage to a woman he'd known mere days, but the memory of her tearful vulnerability and unwavering gratitude flashed in his mind. If a single vow could shield her from a cruel world, maybe it was worth the gamble. In a frontier ruled by chance and shifting fortunes, sometimes all a man had was the willingness to do right by someone else. That next morning, Tom wasted no time. He found Reverend Cole at the edge of town, lodging above the general store. The Reverend was a wiry man with a kind gaze, wearing a threadbare black coat. When Tom explained the situation, Cole studied him with a mixture of empathy and caution. "This is quite sudden," the preacher observed. "Marriage shouldn't be entered into lightly, even if it's a kindness." Tom sighed. "Reverend, I ain't sayin' this is a fairy tale, but Miss Eliza's alone in a dangerous place. I can't leave her to the wolves." Cole nodded. "Well, if 2 consenting adults are resolved, I'll perform the ceremony. Let it be said, though, I've never married a couple in a saloon before." "Saloon," Tom echoed. Blanching Cole's lips twitched in a soft smile. "Charlie Burns told me that's where the folks in Red Hawk Springs gather. Seems the town lacks a proper church. If we want witnesses and some semblance of formality, that's our best bet." And so, with reluctance, Tom agreed to the Buffalo Heart Saloon as the wedding venue, a place more accustomed to drunken brawls than holy vows. By noon, the word had spread. Patrons pressed against the bar travelers paused mid-journey, and Rosie, the saloon's most flamboyant hostess, gleefully twirled in her bright red dress. A mixture of curiosity and cynicism brought them in. Few believed in the sudden union of a broke cowboy and a jilted bride, but nearly everyone wanted to watch Eliza arrived at the saloon's threshold, wearing the borrowed grey dress once more. She had carefully pinned her hair back, though a few curled strands escaped in the heat. In her trembling hands, she clutched a tiny rhinestone hair comb Tom had gifted her earlier that day, a small token to replace the white lace she refused to wear again. She scanned the crowd with anxious eyes. Mocking whispers about her weight still slipped through the gathering, but she squared her shoulders, determined not to falter. Tom met her in the center of the makeshift aisle, cleared near the bar. Reverend Cole stood in front of a battered upright piano, clutching a tattered Bible. On either side, curious onlookers formed a ragged semicircle. Charlie Burns had arranged 2 shot glasses on the bar, as if anticipating a celebratory or commiserative toast. When Eliza and Tom's gazes locked, everything else seemed to fade. The snickers, the dusty floors, the stench of spilled whiskey. In that moment, it was just 2 souls attempting to piece together shattered hopes. Cole's voice cut through the hush. "We gather here under God's watchful eye to unite Tom Hathaway and Eliza Bradford in holy matrimony. Though these circumstances are unorthodox, let us remember, marriage is a covenant of mutual support, honesty and respect." A subdued ripple passed through the onlookers. Rosie dabbed a tear from her heavily rouged cheek, while a few rowdy ranch hands stifled laughter behind grimy hats. Tom exhaled, swallowing dryly. "Do you, Tom Hathaway, take Eliza Bradford to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Cole asked, his voice firm yet kind. Tom's throat tightened. He thought about how ill-prepared he was. No home, no savings, no illusions of a typical family life. But he also saw Eliza's trembling resolve and knew he couldn't let her down. "I do," he said, voice quiet, but steady. "And do you, Eliza, Bradford, take Tom Hathaway to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Eliza's eyes glistened with tears. She remembered every scornful remark about her figure, every heartbreak that had led her here. But in Tom's eyes, she saw empathy, kindness, and a willingness to stand beside her. "I do," she whispered, voice quavering with pent-up emotion. Reverend Cole lifted his Bible. "By the authority vested in me and God's grace, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may seal your vows with a kiss." A tremor of nervous energy coursed through Tom. He raised a trembling hand to Eliza's cheek, brushing aside a stray curl, and leaned in. Their lips met a tender, hesitant touch that spoke of shared uncertainties. A wave of applause, whistles, and a few bawdy cheers broke the silence. Rosie clapped tears brimming in her eyes, while others muttered half-drunk blessings or smug remarks. Charlie slid the 2 shot glasses across the bar. To the bride and groom, he said, pouring whiskey into each. Tom and Eliza exchanged glances and downed the shots, the burn of cheap liquor sealing their improvised union. The wedding concluded as abruptly as it had begun. Some returned to card games. Others drifted outside to gossip in the mid-afternoon sun. But for Tom and Eliza, everything had changed. They were no longer strangers, nor merely allies. They were husband and wife, bound by law and by a promise forged in the face of adversity. As the saloon's ruckus resumed, Tom placed a reassuring hand at Eliza's waist, guiding her through the thinning crowd. She leaned into him, relief mingling with the weight of a future that neither understood. For better or worse, they had taken a leap of faith in a place not known for second chances. Standing under the saloon's eaves, the afternoon heat pressing in, Tom searched Eliza's face. "You all right?" she nodded, though her eyes glimmered with tears of both fear and something like hope. "Yes," she whispered. "As long as we face this together," Tom squeezed her hand. He might be a broke cowboy, but in that moment, he vowed to defend his wife with all the strength he had. For in a frontier, as untamed as the hearts inhabiting it, any promise, even one born of desperation, could become the foundation for something real. If anything, the aftermath of the ceremony was even more daunting than the wedding itself. At least during the vows, Tom and Eliza knew precisely what to do. Follow Reverend Cole's directions. Say the words, exchange a tentative kiss. But once they stepped back into the ordinary world, they were bombarded with practicalities. Their first challenge was lodging. Mrs. Caldwell, already surprised by the sudden wedding, consented to let Tom and Eliza share a slightly larger room at a slightly higher price. Tom parted with most of his meager day labor earnings to secure a week's stay in advance. It wasn't exactly a honeymoon suite, a narrow bed, a chipped wash basin, and a single window that rattled in the wind. Entering that room together for the first time, they were acutely aware of the bed, the symbol of a union that for now existed more in law than in intimacy. Eliza flushed, smoothing her borrowed dress and tucking a curl behind her ear. Tom cleared his throat, setting his hat on the dresser. "Can sleep on the floor." He offered hastily the notion of sharing the same bed, unnerving them both. Eliza exhaled a small, relieved laugh. "That's probably best for tonight," she agreed softly. There was no offense in her eyes, only a mutual understanding that their union was not yet that kind of partnership they made do with the meager resources. Tom spread blankets on the floor, while Eliza climbed gingerly onto the bed. The night was stifling, even with the window cracked open. Yet the hush that fell between them was not wholly uncomfortable. There was a hint of safety in it, born of shared experiences, and the relief that at least they wouldn't face tomorrow alone. As darkness settled, Tom lay awake, arms behind his head, gazing at the faint moonlight that filtered through the curtains. The sounds of distant saloon revelry wafted through the thin glass laughter. A piano's discordant chords, a barked order for more whiskey. Thoughts churned in his mind like restless cattle. How would he provide for Eliza? Was her presence in his life a blessing or a chain binding them both? More than once, he considered the vow they'd just made for better or worse, and felt the weight of it settle across his tired shoulders. Eventually, the day's fatigue claimed him. His last conscious memory was the faint scent of lavender soap that drifted from Eliza's side of the room, a strangely comforting fragrance in this harsh land. The first few days of Tom and Eliza's marriage unfolded with a delicate blend of caution and camaraderie. Tom threw himself into day labor, repairing corral fences at the Jenkins Ranch, assisting with deliveries at the general store, and offering his services as a stable hand when needed. Every coin he earned went straight to Mrs. Caldwell for rent and whatever food he could afford to bring home. Eliza, meanwhile, busied herself as best she could. Though the ladies of Red Hawk Springs were not entirely unwelcoming, Eliza could feel their probing stares and hear their whispered judgments. Her figure was always the first topic. "Have you seen Tom's new wife? She's a big girl, isn't she?" Some folks claimed Tom had only married her for a hidden dowry, while others suspected Eliza had lied about her finances to lure a willing husband. The rumors were relentless, but Eliza kept her head high. She'd already faced abandonment in the most humiliating fashion. For Tom's part, each dawn brought the same question: how to make a living for two. He stayed out from sunrise to sundown, returning with sore muscles and enough pay to keep them fed. In the evenings, he'd find Eliza in their room, sewing a tear in one of his shirts, or attempting to cook a simple stew over the boarding house's communal hearth. Their conversations tiptoed around the subject of intimacy and the uncertain road ahead, but they discovered small joys in each other's company, an unexpected joke, shared memories of childhood, or the relief in simply having a trusted ally in a hostile place. One afternoon, while Tom fixed a sagging porch for a local rancher, a young hand from the Jenkins place rode up in a hurry. "Hathaway," the young man shouted, reining in his horse. "There's a Pinkerton detective in town asking about a con man named Roger Harris. Says the scoundrel swindles women with promises of marriage." Tom froze, hammer in hand. Anger, dread, and grim satisfaction mingled in his gut. So Harris really was a crook. His gaze flicked to the line of cottonwoods in the distance, the dusty horizon beyond them. If the Pinkerton agency was involved, trouble couldn't be far behind. But perhaps it also meant justice for Eliza. That evening, Tom found the boarding house in an uproar. Mrs. Caldwell, arms folded tight, glowered at a slender man in a black suit, a bowler hat perched on his neatly combed hair. His badge read, Pinkerton Detective Agency. The detective, who introduced himself as Thomas Rigby, carried a small notebook and wore a practiced air of composure. Eliza stood nearby, her face drawn with worry. Rigby turned, sizing Tom up with calculating eyes. "I hear you're the man who married Eliza Bradford now." "Eliza Hathaway," he said, flipping through the notebook's pages. Tom nodded curtly. "That's right." Rigby scratched something down with a pencil. "Congratulations. Though my business is more about the man who abandoned her." Seems your bride was just one more notch on his belt if he'd succeeded in robbing her. Eliza swallowed hard. So it's true. He's a con man. Rigby gave a grave nod. Indeed, several families back east have lodged complaints of a man calling himself Roger Harris, luring women with false promises of marriage. Once he secures any valuables, he vanishes. Tom clenched his fists. A flash of fury ignited in his chest. If he shows his face in Red Hawk Springs again, he'll answer to me. Eliza looked between them, tears threatening. Do you think he might come back? Detective Rigby closed his notebook. Hard to say. Men like Harris crave easy targets. If he discovers that you're now married, he may decide there's nothing left to gain. Still, I'll be in town a few days, snooping around. If either of you learns anything, tell me immediately. With that, he tipped his bowler hat and left, promising to return if he needed more information. When the door closed, Eliza collapsed onto a wooden chair, covering her face. Tom, still tense with anger, lowered himself beside her. You're safe from him now, he said, gently laying a calloused hand on her shoulder. He can't claim you or your money. She peered at him through teary eyes. Nay, I never had much at all. He must have realized I wasn't worth the trouble. Her voice cracked a blend of bitterness and relief. It hurts knowing it was all a sham. Every sweet word in his letters. Just lies. Tom's heart twisted for her. He's the one at a loss, he said softly. He'll never know the decent woman you are. She sniffed, lifting her gaze. Thank you, she whispered, voice thick. Then, surprising them both, she reached for his hand and squeezed it, her touch a fragile lifeline in a storm of betrayal. Over the next few days, Rigby roamed the dusty streets, asking questions, visiting the saloon, searching for any trace of Harris. The rumor mill, ever eager, churned out new theories. Maybe Harris was secretly hiding out at the old silver mine, or maybe he'd fled south toward Mexico with a pack of outlaws. Tom and Eliza clung to each other in wary anticipation. Whether Harris reappeared or not, the weight of his betrayal cast a shadow over their fledgling marriage. Yet in the quiet moments, like sharing a simple dinner of beans and cornbread in their cramped room, they found a tenderness that neither expected. Each day they learned small details about each other. Tom's passion for horse training, Eliza's love of reading and sewing, Tom's hidden scars from childhood hardships, Eliza's old dream of opening a tiny dress shop. Piece by piece, they discovered the human being beneath the desperation. For a couple who'd said vows out of sheer necessity, they were uncovering a companionship that defied the town's ugly gossip. And as the relentless sun rose and fell on Red Hawk Springs, forging those who lived there in fire and dust, Tom and Eliza Hathaway took hesitant steps toward building a life that might, against all odds, truly belong to them. 2 weeks passed. Life settled into a tenuous routine for Tom and Eliza. He rose before dawn to catch work, while she mended garments, tidied their modest room, and occasionally helped Mrs. Caldwell with household chores for a few extra coins. On the surface, Red Hawk Springs seemed almost peaceful, except for the continuing undercurrent of rumors that swelled with each new piece of gossip. One balmy afternoon, Eliza ventured out to the mercantile to buy flour and beans. She tried to ignore the snickers from a pair of saloon girls leaning against a veranda post. Their voices carried, though they clearly made no effort to whisper. That's the too fat bride who snared Broken Spur, right? He must be after some inheritance. No way a man like him marries that. Eliza stiffened knuckles white around her shopping basket. She fought the urge to snap back, recalling Tom's gentle admonition, "Don't let him drag you down." Eliza, Let your happiness speak for itself. Still, the words stung like nettles against her pride. When she reached the mercantile's worn steps, she found Rosie, the flamboyant saloon hostess, already waiting, arms folded under her ample bosom. Rosie's bright attire and theatrical manner made her a fixture of town gossip. Yet her face was unusually stern as she studied Eliza Walwright, Mrs. Hathaway. Rosie asked Eliza, forced a smile. "I'm fine, just picking up a few supplies." Rosie pursed her lips. "Folks been real nasty with their words. Don't let them grind you down. People around here love a scandal. You just happen to be the star of it." Eliza hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you for your kindness." Rosie's features softened. "You're a strong woman, honey. Stronger than folks realize." With that, she sauntered off, swishing her colorful skirts behind her, leaving Eliza oddly comforted by the unexpected ally. Inside the mercantile, the storekeeper, Mr. Franklin, greeted Eliza courteously enough. But as she browsed the shelves, a familiar, unwelcome voice reached her ears. Well, well, if it isn't the jilted bride who married a pauper." Eliza stiffened. Turning, she found herself face to face with a broad-shouldered, scarred man wearing a black vest. He had a sneering grin that made her skin crawl. Two other ruffians flanked him, one scrawny and twitchy, the other with a smirk of ill intent. Mr. Franklin peered over the counter. Alarmed. "Now, gents don't cause trouble in my store." The scarred man ignored the storekeeper's eyes, fixed on Eliza. "Heard you were supposed to marry Roger Harris. Shame that didn't work out, but maybe you got a consolation prize, hooking up with that cowboy." His companions sniggered. A chill raced down Eliza's spine. How did these men know about Harris? Were they working with him? Heart pounding. She mustered her nerve. "Do I know you?" she demanded, voice faltering only slightly. His grin widened. "Not yet. But maybe you should. Word is, Harris might still be sniffing around. If you have any valuables left, you might want to reconsider your choice in husbands." Fear flashed in her eyes. "I have nothing to say to you." She tried to sidestep him, but he blocked her path. The storekeeper looked ready to intervene, but the scrawny man placed a hand on his holstered revolver, silencing any protest. The scarred man leaned close, breath sour. "You let that Pinkerton fellow know. There's no call to keep searching." Harris left, but me and my boys might have business in these parts. Eliza forced herself not to recoil. "What business?" "None of yours," he growled. "But maybe if you're nice, we'll let you keep that fancy trunk of yours." Her heart thudded. She realized they were extorting or threatening her on Harris's behalf, or maybe for their own reasons. Summoning courage, she glared. "I'm not afraid of you." She managed, though. Her trembling limbs betrayed otherwise. "My husband will." "Your husband?" The man mocked. "Broken spur. Is it? He's got no money, no land. Let's see if he's so tough when we corner him." Eliza clutched her basket, refusing to show weakness. "If you lay a hand on him or me, you'll have the Pinkertons and the whole town to answer to." She hoped her bluff carried weight, but even she knew half the town wouldn't lift a finger against a gang of outlaws. The scarred man eyed her one last time, then stepped aside with mocking courtesy. "After you, Mrs. Hathaway." Eliza brushed past, heart pounding furiously. She hurried to the counter, paid for her goods, and exited into the glaring sun. She felt their eyes on her back every step of the way, until she finally turned a corner and lost sight of them. Only then did she allow herself to breathe, tears prickling at her eyes. She needed to find Tom. Back at the boarding house, she nearly collided with him in the hallway. Tom steadied her, alarmed by her pale face. "Eliza, what's wrong?" She told him everything in a rush about the scarred man, and his threats about Roger Harris's possible connection to them, Tom's expression hardened like granite. He set down his hat, guided Eliza into their room, and closed the door. "Did they hurt you?" he demanded, voice low and tense. She shook her head. "No, but they said they might be around. They threatened you too." Tom forced himself to stay calm. "We'll bring this to the Pinkerton detective. Rigby might know who they are." Eliza nodded, tears threatening to spill. I was so scared. Before she could stop herself, she threw her arms around Tom. She half expected him to recoil, but he gently wrapped his arms around her, stroking her hair as she trembled against his chest. For a moment, neither spoke. They simply existed in that close warmth, each a salve to the other's fears. Finally, Tom cleared his throat, voice rumbling in her ear. "It'll be all right. You're safe with me." It was a promise Eliza wanted desperately to believe, and in his arms for that fleeting moment, she did, under the Pinkerton detective's guidance. Tom and Eliza recounted every detail of the mercantile confrontation. Rigby was as poised as ever, scribbling in his notebook. The man with the scar, he muttered. Likely Sam Kilroy, an outlaw rumored to be in league with Roger Harris. They run confidence games, swindling folks out of property or gold claims. Eliza shivered. So Harris might still be working with them. Rigby nodded, lips tight, I suspect. So, we had a lead that Harris was promised a share of some hidden silver near the old mine. It's possible he roped Kilroy and his men into fronting the muscle. Tom frowned, so they might be out there now, waiting for the right moment to strike. Exactly. Rigby closed his notebook with a snap. I intend to notify the local marshal, but he's often stretched thin. If you two see or hear anything, you let me know. Meantime, stay vigilant. Kilroy is dangerous. After the detective left, Tom and Eliza exchanged worried glances. Eliza's voice trembled. "What if they come after us, Tom?" He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I won't let that happen. Maybe it's time we think about moving on. Finding a safer spot." "But you just started building some stability here," she protested weakly. "And we can barely afford to travel." Tom exhaled. "I know, but between the gossip and the outlaw threats, maybe this town ain't big enough for us." There was an unmistakable hint of sadness in his tone. He'd spent years drifting across the plains, hoping to plant roots somewhere. Eliza's eyes brimmed. "I feel like we only just found each other. And now we're talking about running again." He gently brushed a tear from her cheek. "Not running exactly. Just choosing a life that's safer." They both lapsed into uneasy silence. Neither yearned to remain in a place so hostile to Eliza's figure and Tom's precarious finances. Yet the notion of venturing out to unknown territory, especially with Kilroy's gang lurking, felt equally daunting. So they held on to their shaky status quo a bit longer, hoping the Pinkerton detective would corner Harris or Kilroy first. In the meantime, an odd warmth settled into their private hours. At night they'd share small confessions, each story a brick laid in the tenuous foundation of their marriage. Tom, who rarely spoke of his past, revealed how his father died in a range war, leaving him to fend for himself by age 15. Eliza, tears in her eyes, recounted the cruelty of society back east. How relatives teased her for her weight. How pleasantly plump was a euphemism that stung just as badly as any insult. "You're not just a figure or a dress size," Tom said one evening, voice thick with sincerity. "You're, well, Eliza. And that's enough for me." Her chest felt tight. "Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be enough for myself." He squeezed her hand. "Give it time." Such moments of gentleness were new to them both. While their marriage had started from necessity, seeds of genuine care were taking root. Eliza found herself appreciating Tom's quiet steadiness. He might not be a silver-tongued romantic, but he proved his devotion in 1,000 subtle ways, like defending her against the local bullies or saving half his lunch for her when money ran short. In turn, Tom grew fond of Eliza's resilient spirit. Yes, she had moments of doubt, but she also possessed a core of warmth that glowed through any darkness. Those small revelations tied them together, even as the spectre of Kilroy's gang and Roger Harris loomed. Each day, they lived in a tension between tenderness and dread, uncertain when the next storm might break. The storm finally arrived on a blisteringly hot afternoon. Tom had just returned from the Jenkins Ranch pockets, jingling with a handful of coins, when the sharp crack of gunfire echoed through Red Hawk Springs. Townsfolk scattered, diving for cover. Horses reared their panicked whinnies, adding to the chaos, heart pounding. Tom rushed toward the commotion, only to see a figure sprinting away from the boarding house. A tall man with broad shoulders and a scar on his face. Kilroy's smoke curled from the barrel of his revolver. 2 more ruffians followed, racing for their horses. Fear for Eliza seized Tom. Shouting her name, he sprinted inside. The foyer was in disarray. Chairs overturned. Mrs. Caldwell crouched behind the stairwell. Trembling, he took her. She cried, eyes wide. "Took your wife. They stormed in with guns." Eliza fought back, but Tom felt ice in his veins. "Where'd they go?" Mrs. Caldwell gestured with a shaky hand. "They said something about the old silver mine. Claimed they'd trade her for gold or money you owe them. I'm so sorry, Tom." But Tom was already bolting out the door. He spotted the Pinkerton detective, Rigby, at the far end of the street, crouched behind a wagon with a revolver drawn. "They took Eliza." Tom yelled, voice raw with fury. Rigby's eyes hardened. "Kilroy's men. They must want leverage." He holstered his gun. "Jogging over. We'll need a posse. I'm not waiting," Tom growled, striding to his mare. He vaulted into the saddle, adrenaline surging. "They've got my wife. I'm going now." Rigby looked torn. "You'll need backup. These men are killers." Tom's gaze burned with unwavering resolve. "Hurry and gather whoever you can, but I'm riding out. I won't let 'em harm her," spurring his horse. Tom galloped away, dust kicking up behind him. He followed the trail, leading north toward the dilapidated mine on the outskirts of town. Desperate scenarios played in his head. Eliza bound and terrified. Kilroy sneering as he demanded ransom. The thought spurred him faster, each hoofbeat a war drum of determination. The sun hung low by the time Tom neared the mine. It yawned like a dark mouth in the hillside, timbers rotting around its entrance. He dismounted, tethering his mare behind a patch of mesquite. Quietly, he circled the area. Sure enough, 3 horses were tied near a rickety outbuilding that once served as a supply shack. Voices reached him, Kilroy's men. He heard a muffled cry, Eliza's voice. Tom's pulse hammered. Gripping his revolver, he crept closer. Through a gap in the shack's wall, he spied Eliza, her wrists bound, ankles tied to a post. She looked frightened, but also furious, her eyes flashing with defiance. Kilroy stood over her, brandishing his gun. A second man lounged nearby, loading shells into a shotgun, while the scrawny third kept watch. "Your cowboy better show," Kilroy snarled, pointing the barrel at Eliza, "or you'll regret the day you set foot in Red Hawk Springs." Terror flitted across Eliza's face, but she mustered her courage. "Tom will come." She managed, voice shaking but resolute. "And you'll regret taking me." Tom inhaled fury, fueling every nerve. He had to act fast. Waiting for Rigby's posse might be too late. Positioning himself behind a broken window, Tom aimed at the scrawny outlaw. The bullet tore through the silence, striking the man's shoulder. He collapsed with a shriek. Chaos erupted. Kilroy whirled, returning fire. Tom ducked behind the shack's wall as a storm of bullets peppered the boards. Heart pounding, he shifted position and fired again, forcing Kilroy's other man to dive behind a crate. Eliza, pinned and vulnerable, watched with a mixture of terror and relief. She spotted Tom's boots under the gap in the wall, realizing he was just feet away. Though her wrists burned from the rope, she strained to loosen the knot. She had to help him somehow. Kilroy cursed. "You think you can take us on alone, cowboy?" he hollered, reloading. "This ends with you, dead and me collecting that sweet ransom." Tom crouched, adrenaline roaring. "You picked the wrong woman to use as bait." Gunfire erupted again, bullets thudding into the shack. One grazed Tom's arm. Drawing blood, he clenched his teeth against the pain and fired twice more. A strangled cry told him he'd hit Kilroy's second man. 2 down, 1 to go. But Kilroy was the deadliest. Seeing his men fallen, he snarled, "You'll pay, Hathaway!" Then, in a flash of cunning, he lunged for Eliza, grabbing her by the hair and pulling her in front of him like a shield. Tom froze. Kilroy pressed his revolver to Eliza's temple. "Drop your gun or she dies!" Eliza whimpered, tears streaming. But she locked eyes with Tom, silently begging him not to surrender. Tom's mind raced. If he laid down his gun, Kilroy would kill them both anyway. But one wrong move and Eliza could catch a bullet. A new sound cut through the tension hoofbeats. Through the shack's shattered doorway, Tom glimpsed Rigby leading a handful of armed men toward the mine. The Pinkerton detective had arrived. Relief surged in Tom. If they timed this right, maybe he and Eliza could make it out alive. Sensing danger, Kilroy snarled, "I don't have time for this." He cocked the gun at Eliza's head, dragging her toward the door. "I'll kill her first, then." Eliza's survival instincts kicked in. Summoning every ounce of strength, she lifted her bound arms, swinging them back into Kilroy's ribs. He gasped momentarily, thrown off balance. It was the opening Tom needed. A single shot cracked the air, lodging a bullet in Kilroy's gun arm. He roared with agony, dropping his weapon. Eliza tore free from his grip and fell to the ground. Tom rushed inside, revolver trained on Kilroy, who clutched his bleeding arm. Outside, Rigby and the posse thundered up, guns at the ready. When Kilroy reached for a hidden knife, Tom kicked it away. "Don't even try," he growled. Kilroy glared, spitting blood. "You miserable cowboy." Tom's fist connected with Kilroy's jaw, sending the outlaw sprawling. That blow carried every ounce of rage at the man who dared threaten Eliza, panting. Tom knelt to untie her ankles and wrists. She sobbed relief, coursing through her as she collapsed against him. Rigby and the others secured Kilroy and the wounded men, ensuring they were disarmed. The Pinkerton detective cast Tom an approving nod. "Fine work, Hathaway. You saved your wife's life." Tom gently brushed hair from Eliza's face, tears brimming in his own eyes. "You all right?" he whispered. She nodded shakily, voice barely above a whisper. "You came for me." "Always," he murmured, pulling her close. With Kilroy's gang subdued, a hush settled over the old mine. Sunset's blood-red light filtered through the broken boards, casting long shadows. In that eerie glow, Tom cradled Eliza against him, heart pounding with the realization of how close he'd come to losing her. She trembled with aftershocks of terror, but her arms clung to him, refusing to let go. A single thought blazed in Tom's mind. He would never let anyone hurt her again. News of Kilroy's capture swept through Red Hawk Springs like wildfire. In hushed awe, Townsfolk marveled at how Tom Hathaway, the so-called broken spur, risked his life to rescue his wife. The same people who once whispered cruel things about Eliza's figure now glanced her way with newfound respect. She was no longer the too-fat bride, but a woman whose courage had matched her husband's. The gossip shifted. Tom and Eliza, once mocked, were now the talk of town for the right reasons. Even Mrs. Caldwell offered softer glances, and Rosie from the saloon beamed with pride. "Real strength," she said. "Don't come in corset sizes or coin purses." Then came the twist among Kilroy's belongings. The Pinkerton detective found a map to a forgotten silver vein near the old mine. Rigby handed it to Tom and Eliza, saying with a smile, "Consider it karmic justice." With what little savings they had, the couple registered a claim. Soon a modest patch of land, once worthless, was theirs. It wasn't much, but to them it meant everything. Each sunrise found them side by side, repairing the shack, planting dreams into the dust. Tom worked the land, while Eliza mended clothes and cooked meals over a simple hearth. Their marriage, born of desperation, grew into something deep and unshakable. Love took root where judgment had once bloomed. In a town that had doubted them, they stood as living proof sometimes. The best revenge is simply building a good life. And in the Wild West, that's as close to a happy ending as anyone could ask for. Thank you for venturing into the rugged world of Red Hawk Springs and sharing Tom and Eliza's extraordinary journey. From the moment our too-fat bride tumbled off the stagecoach to the bullet-riddled showdown at the abandoned mine, every trial tested their courage and proved that genuine hearts can triumph over cruelty and deceit if their story of hard-fought love, fortitude, and karmic justice resonated with you. Then let's keep this spirit of optimism and resilience alive. Please hit that like button if you cheered for Tom and Eliza's victory. Share this tale with friends or loved ones who might need a reminder that hope can spark in the darkest places. And if you want to experience more stories of grit, grace, and unexpected romance, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Thank you for listening, and stay ready for your next thrilling adventure in the Wild West.